Building a better Bay Area. Moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC 7 News.
Hi there, I'm Kristen Z. You're watching Getting Answers, live on ABC 7. We ask experts your questions every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. So huge news in the travel industry. JetBlue offers to buy Spirit Airlines. What does that mean for you? And this past week's massive delays and cancellations, leaving passengers stranded for days without compensation, it's becoming more common. A travel industry analyst will offer some strategies to help you if you're planning to fly. But first, a lot of COVID headlines. Today, the FDA is holding a special meeting to plan the next round of boosters. Also, news that San Francisco has the highest case rate out of all counties in California. Joining us now live to discuss these topics and answer questions you might have, and you can pose them on our Facebook Live feed, is UCSF infectious disease specialist, Dr. Monica Gandhi. Dr. Gandhi, great to see you. Thanks for your time. So the FDA is meeting, I think, at this moment, right? They're outside advisors trying to consider the next round of boosters. Now, you have been clear. You say our national booster strategy needs to be clarified. What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is, I think that President Biden has said in speeches, he said it around Omicron, that our goal is now to protect ourselves against severe disease. And in fact, the CDC has done that as well by essentially linking mask mandates or mask recommendations to the number of people in the hospital. 10 over 100,000 is the time for the public to mask. Less than 10 over 100,000, no need. So essentially, we are going towards this strategy that we need to prevent severe disease. And in Israel, when they looked at data, because they rolled out a forced shot to everybody, 50 to 65-year-olds in a big Israeli healthcare worker study, because they rolled it out to older people above 60, but also all healthcare workers, didn't get any advantage in getting a fourth shot over their third shot in vaccine effectiveness or bringing down their viral loads. So we don't have data for a younger population. And we're just assuming that older people need it, which I think is fair. That's always true with boosters. So probably we just need to come up with an age. I know we've already decided here, but UK is doing over 75, Germany's doing over 70, Canada's doing over 80, Sweden's doing over 80, but the US is the only one that went down to 50 for a booster. And it may help your antibodies go up for a little bit, but the third shot has done a great job in protecting us against severe disease.
So I want to explore that a little bit more. If 50 and up, which is what they've set it at, is not the right benchmark for you, what do you think it should be?
I think it should have been older because it's not, we don't have evidence that there's benefit between 50 and 65-year-olds. So I think 65 would have been fine because it's younger than any other place that's doing it, but it's what Pfizer had asked for. So they had data that they wanted the fourth shot for over 65, but the FDA went above and beyond the Pfizer data and went down to 50, and we didn't see the evidence for that.
If there's no evidence that it's beneficial, is there any evidence that it may be actually harmful or not beneficial or hurtful?
I don't think this is a question that's sort of unprecedented because we've never really given, we've never had a pandemic where there's 4 shots given in such a short period of time. Usually the way that we give 4 shots are in children because we're preventing it for something else like measles, but it's not like we're giving it in the midst of a pandemic. I would say that there are immunologists who raise concerns about 2 things. One is you keep on training your immune system to the old ancestral strain of the virus because what's in the mRNA vaccine is the ancestral strain. It's actually the Wuhan H2 virus is what they call it. And so you keep on training your T cells, even though we're already on Omicron, to look back at the non-circulating variant. And then the second is, is it just wrong for your immune system to get so many shots? Now, I don't see any evidence for the latter. I'm more worried about the former, that you keep on training your T cells, whereas your T cells already know how to work with the variants they see. If they see a variant in the future, we've already shown that the vaccines generate B cells and you develop antibodies that are directed against that variant. There's some people who need their antibodies nice and high, and that would be immunocompromised or older people. And again, 70 to 80 is kind of the age range in other countries.
Okay. No, I know know a lot of people who are considering when is the best time for them to get that fourth shot, or for most people, the second booster. So I think you need to take into account how long the booster lasts. I think I read something, correct me if I'm wrong, that shows that it starts to wane after 4 weeks. Is that right?
Well, yes. So that's the other thing, is that what's the timing of the booster if you want to get a booster? So you kind of want to do it when cases are high. You know that your antibodies are going to come down with time. Again, the cellular immunity protects you. But if you want your antibodies nice and high, you want to kind of time it. And so usually when cases are going to go up more, it's likely around respiratory pathogen season. And how long do the antibodies last? Well, some studies have said 2 months. Some studies have said 4 months from CDC. The longest that I've seen is 6 months, but they absolutely are going to come down. So, for example, I'll give you an example. My mother's 80 and doesn't have other health problems. I'm asking her to get her 4th shot in the summer because I think that it's going to be fall and winter when the cases go up.
Okay.
And I want her antibodies nice and high.
Okay. All right. Something to think about. Randy wants to know, are we protected from the new XE variant out of the UK that's getting some attention by the existing vaccines and boosters?
Yes, but it depends on if you mean severe disease or more mild. So to look at BA1, BA2, XE, what are these things? Well, Omicron has a bunch of subvariants, and BA1 was the first subvariant. Now BA2 is taken over. 72% of our sequences in the US are BA2. And then what XE is in a single individual, BA1 and BA2 combined, and they became one virus, but they did something called recombination. It looks like the vaccines are still protective against all of these, actually. It's just that the antibodies don't work as well, which is why people even got mild infections when they'd been boosted during our Omicron surge in San Francisco, which everyone was surprised about, but that's because the antibodies don't work as well against a variant that has 32 mutations across its spike protein. But severe disease is still protected by our cells. So it's possible you could get a mild infection with XE.
All right, Dr. Monica Gandhi, please do stay with us. We have a whole nother segment to chat with you. We'll take a short break, but if you want to join us over on Facebook Live, right now we'll explore the question, is there a better booster? Could that possibly be Covaxin? So we'll talk about that. Join us on Facebook Live.
In commercial break.
All right, so let's talk about that. That is not one that we use here in the U.S., right, Covaxin, but what do we know about it, and is there a convincing argument for that being our additional boosters?
Yes. So, so to remind ourselves, the mRNA vaccines just show us the spike protein, just show us one sticking out part of the virus. What Covaxin and a couple of other vaccines do is they show you the entire virus. They're actually the virus killed and then combined with something called an adjuvant that makes you have a better immune response. Covaxin is the best of the 3 that we have in the world because Sinopharm and Sinovac, their adjuvant doesn't work as well. Those are Chinese-made products. This is an India-made product, but its adjuvant was funded by the NIH, so it's a really good adjuvant. So Covaxin, if it shows you the whole virus, say we get a variant in the future, a worst case scenario, that has multiple mutations across its surfaces, we'd want to see the whole virus for our booster, not just the spike protein that could be mutated and the one that it's very different. So that's why I really want Covaxin to be considered by the FDA. And I think they are actually considering it for the winter.
Okay. Hey, I'm seeing a couple comments here from our viewers. Alex, the best doctor ever, Dr. Gandhi. So some love and appreciation here for you on Facebook Live. Erica has a question for you. What should I do if I got J&J first vax, then a Moderna booster? Should I get another booster after 6 months? I'm a healthy 51-year-old with no other health issues.
Well, that's a great question because Johnson & Johnson, through the Omicron surge, there was just recent data, held up better than people thought. Like, it actually is a very good vaccine, and I feel like it got a bad rap for a while. I think you can get another mRNA vaccine now as a booster, but I would prefer that you get it closer to the time of where I think cases are going to be higher, which is fall and winter. And I would do that at the end of the summer.
All right,
just be nice and slow.
Dr. Gandhi coming back on air in about 5 seconds.
4, 3, 2, 1.
We are back now with infectious disease specialist Dr. Monica Gandhi. Dr. Gandhi, reported today San Francisco has the highest case rate in the state, looking at all the 58 counties. Why is this happening, and how should we interpret that?
Okay, so keep in mind the cases are still low, but it is the highest in the state. So why? I think part of the reason is we actually do a really good job with testing. We have mass testing sites that have not been dismantled. They're a combination of UCSF and the SFDPH. Most of the other places in the state, those mass testing sites have been dismantled. So people can go and get tests. People do test here. And we've had a lot more activity, and we have had conventions, and our cases are going up. 0 people in the hospital in which I work are hospitalized with COVID. 5 at UCSF Parnassus are hospitalized. 3 of them are incidental. Hospitalization staying low. And that speaks to how good of immunity we have in our population. So keep your eye on severe disease and the fact that it's staying low. I think that's very reassuring.
So this brings me back to where we kind of started in terms of talking about whether we should guide future actions based on cases or hospitalizations and deaths, right? One question that comes into my mind is, how about, for example, brain shrinkage or other long COVID potential symptoms, right? Because if that is actually a thing, even with mild infections, doesn't that speak to we still want to keep cases low, even if people aren't getting hospitalized?
I think that's an excellent question. So 2 things I'll say about long COVID symptoms. One is that we may have talked about this study before, but this is the largest study from Israel that looks at good control groups. You cannot do a study on long COVID unless you're comparing it to people who have not been infected with COVID, because getting brain fog, feeling depressed is very common right now in the context of a pandemic. It's been a really hard time. So you have to compare it to people who have not had COVID. In the largest study out of Israel, mild breakthrough infections after vaccination did not lead to any more COVID symptoms than people who had never had COVID. I think that really speaks to the power of control groups in your studies. Second is that particular study that showed brain shrinkage, very importantly, was only in the area called the olfactory center that is responsible for smell. When you lose your smell, having a mild COVID infection, you have less feedback to that area of the brain, and you may have some shrinkage in that area. When your smell comes back, that area will come back. It was not diffuse brain damage. There's no evidence that COVID infects what are called neurons or the cells in the brain.
Okay. Look, so I saw today that Stanford University has 200 cases. This is the week after spring break, of course, so they saw a bump, and those students do have to isolate. If we have decided, and I don't know who the we are, but that the case counts matter less than the severity, then should those students even have to isolate?
So it's a great question. We have not decided on our strategy in the United States. So these students would have to isolate. The UK has decided on their strategy, and the students would not have to isolate. So the UK has gone to what they call endemic management, and they mean it. They mean no, even if you're sick with COVID, if you have symptoms, stay home, but there's no standard time of isolation. You don't even have to tell someone that you got COVID. So I think it's a really important distinction. We're not there yet in this country. The UK has gone full on endemic. Denmark's gone full on endemic, but we're not there. So yes, in this case right now, we're saying stay home. But if we go full on endemic, no, we wouldn't, especially if they're asymptomatic.
And I want to be clear, I'm not advocating one thing or another, but I need to point out things that seem less clear or consistent than they should be, right? For example,
the world is so in transition, right? Some are totally endemic, like UK, some are shut down. Shanghai, 23 million people, and most of the cases are without symptoms. We're completely all over the map right now in this world about how we're dealing with COVID.
For example, we still require, by we I mean the U.S. government via the CDC, TSA, that incoming travelers have to show a negative test before coming into the U.S. And I was thinking, if they're coming from somewhere very similar to the U.S. where they're not different variants, I'm wondering how long they would keep that up, given that we have pretty much dropped our restrictions here in terms of the way we live.
I think that is a restriction that should really be considered to be stopped, because we all know this. Your test can be positive at 10 a.m. Negative at 10 a.m. and positive at 8 p.m. There is no evidence that that has actually limited transmission, is pre-testing of travelers. And it has actually gotten travelers stuck places so that the wealthy get to travel and people who are not as wealthy don't. I mean, I think this is a big equity problem. So at some point that needs to be dropped, and I think there's active discussions about it.
Yeah, look, it's a whole spectrum of how restrictive people think we should be in this moment, but I think we're all in agreement that we need conversations and definition when it comes to our goal and our strategy.
Right.
Dr. Monica Gandhi, always great talking with you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Coming up next, we'll get into the wild world of air travel. Speaking of air travel, with cancellations, mergers, and COVID concerns. We'll be right back.
In commercial break.
All right, everybody, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your questions. I am looking at them at this moment. Lynn, I'm so sorry I wasn't able to get back to your Covaxin question. I'll see if I can pose that for you next time. Sansom, thank you for your comment about Dr. Gandhi. Erica, I hope you got your question answered, and you too, Randy. And thanks for everybody. Always great chatting with you. All right, take a short break and be right back.
I'm so hot, I can melt an ice cube. I'm so cool and I'm gonna get you on the beach like a tsunami. Summer heat, so don't run from it. Super size. Super size.
Eight, 7, 6, 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
You may have followed the news this past week of massive flight delays and cancellations across the country on several airlines. About 3,500 flights were canceled this past weekend alone, with many passengers complaining of being stranded for days with no compensation. Now, this seems to be happening more frequently. What is happening in the industry, and what are the considerations if you plan to fly this summer? Joining us to discuss these questions and more, travel industry analyst, founder of the Atmosphere Research Group, Henry Hartevelt. Henry, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Kristen. Thanks for including me.
Boy, what a weekend, huh? The delays and cancellations were widespread, different regions, different airlines, and of course they all gave different explanations, but there was somewhat of a perfect storm, wasn't there? Can you tell us what happened?
Sure. It really was a travel mess this past weekend. First, we had problems with Alaska Airlines, where there was a pilot action, work action against the airline that forced Alaska to cancel a lot of flights. That was compounded with very bad weather in Florida during a peak spring travel weekend, and 20% or so of flights on large airlines like JetBlue, Delta, and other carriers were canceled because of the bad weather. And on top of that, Southwest Airlines had an IT problem during the weekend, which forced them to cancel more flights across their route network. So it was not a good weekend to try to get from A to B.
Right. Now, I saw a lot of comments on social saying, you blame the weather, but I look up and where I am, the weather is fine. Can you explain to folks kind of the cascading effect, why even if kind of their points A and B are fine weather-wise, that, you know, it could still be messed up due to something happening somewhere else like Florida?
Absolutely. So, the thing about airplanes is they fly. So the weather may be good where you are, and the weather may be good where you're going, but the weather may not be good where your airplane is coming in from. And that is why the airlines will try to cite weather. Now, there's a good reason why airlines do that. If they cite weather, they don't have to give you compensation. Some airlines, though, do try to go above and beyond in taking care of their customers. And so, if you're nice to the agent may be nice to you. But just remember something. They've got policies and the agent can only do so much. It's not like they're the CEO of the company.
All right, well, yeah, right. Speaking of customer service, though, I think JetBlue seemed to have had it the worst this past weekend, at least if you go by Twitter reaction. It wasn't just the cancellation. People really harped on the poor communication, rebooking people for flights 3 days later automatically. And when people say that doesn't work, they can't get to an agent, either at the airport or by phone to talk to them. I want to know what is driving that. There seems to be a dearth of service in terms of customer agents.
Right. Well, look, JetBlue, like a lot of other airlines, is scrambling to rebuild its reservation agent work group. And even though they have brought back a lot of workers who were laid off or who took furlough or were on leave during COVID, they don't have all of those workers back, and they're looking to hire more new workers. Travel's growing. There's a strong spring travel season, and summer looks good too. But JetBlue got caught, and so they didn't have enough reservation agents. They don't have the greatest technology. Sorry, JetBlue, but that's true. And so they also are a smaller airline compared to, say, Southwest or American. So JetBlue just doesn't have that many options, and that may be why people were rebooked several days in advance, because all the other flights are full because of spring break. But you don't care about that if you're trying to get home for work or personal reasons, and you're being told it's a 9-hour wait to talk to somebody.
Right.
It's just not a good way to run an airline.
And of course, on the heels of that, JetBlue today saying they're going to acquire, or they want to, made a bid for Spirit Airlines, a discount carrier. And a lot of people are scratching their heads. What does JetBlue want here? I mean, based on what you just told me, it almost sounds like they just want to buy their human resources, their staff. But what do they want?
Well, I was one of those head scratchers. I will tell you, they are buying Spirit for their airplanes and for their employees. Spirit has a lot of airplanes and a lot of airplanes on order, more airplanes than JetBlue could get on its own. So by acquiring Spirit, if they're successful, JetBlue will almost double in size. It can then redeploy those airplanes to more places. JetBlue claims that the larger airlines pay more attention to its pricing, and so they believe they will be a catalyst not only for more low fares from their own flights, but from competing airlines as well. And with Spirit come not only those airplanes, but the pilots, the reservation agents, airport agents, flight attendants, and more. So we could see potentially, if this goes through, JetBlue could become the 5th largest airline in the U.S.
Are you saying that prices may drop if this merger goes through? Because usually when we think of less competition, that leads to higher prices, right? And Alaska bought Virgin and killed off Virgin America, whatever. And then, usually you want more airlines.
Right. Well, look, the U.S. airline industry is one that has been shrinking because of mergers. And as you mentioned, Alaska acquired Virgin America back in 2016. JetBlue tried to buy Virgin America. They lost. So they've been looking now ever since that for another partner. The airline industry wants size and scope. The airlines need to be large to give us all the flights to all the places we want. JetBlue claims they will bring lower fares. That's their assessment, their position. We'll have to see if it happens. Usually, though, when airlines merge, obviously, less competition leads to fewer low-fare seats out there.
Right. Well, we'll have to see. We'll see if the government approves this. We'll see if, Spirit takes this. I mean, Spirit does fly out of Oakland, so we're keeping our eye on it. But given the situation we just discussed, would you maybe choose a bigger airline like United or American or Delta if you had to fly right now versus the smaller ones for the flexibility, for the perhaps lower chances that something like this weekend would happen again?
So the answer there, Kristen, is it depends. What we all have to remember is that very few airlines now are islands unto themselves. I would take a look at where am I traveling from, which Bay Area airport, and what's my destination, and which airline has the most flights to that destination, which isn't always the largest airline at the airport. So, for example, if you're going somewhere where a smaller airline actually has more flights, you're better off booking that smaller airline, because if something goes wrong, they may have a better ability to protect you on another flight. Another thing to look at, does your airline have a partnership? Alaska Airlines and JetBlue both partner with American. So if something goes wrong with them, maybe they can rebook you on American. United has relationships with Delta, American, and other airlines, and is in the Star Alliance. Delta Airlines also has relationships with other airlines. So you're better off on some of those airlines than an airline that doesn't have any relationships with other carriers. That's Southwest. They're a completely standalone airline right now.
I see. All right. So when they're in trouble, they don't have anyone else to help them. Look, we're getting to the heart of it now. A lot of people are planning their summer travel. Airfares are so high right now for a variety of reasons, right? You talked about the pent-up demand, increased fuel costs due to the Russian war in Ukraine. Do you see prices coming down soon? And I guess, depending on that answer, I'm also trying to figure out if people should be buying now or kind of wait.
So the answer is no, I don't see prices coming down now unless the economy goes off the skids. And in that case, we're probably not going to travel anyway. I would tell folks this: if you are considering taking a trip somewhere for the summer vacation or still for the spring, you find flights that work for you, hotels, whatever it is, book them now. Remember, with most U.S. airlines, though not all, you can usually get a full travel credit if you decide not to take your trip, as long as you're not on the most deeply discounted fares called basic economy. Generally, those are completely not refundable. But if you are booked on just a regular discounted coach fare on many airlines and you can't take the trip or don't want to, or if you see a lower fare that does come along, you can cancel that reservation and your full ticket price is applied as a travel credit that you'll be able to use for at least another year.
Aha. Wow, that's a good tip. Great information, Henry Hartevelt. Thank you so very much. Please don't go away, because we have a couple more minutes to chat on Facebook Live, and I got more questions, and perhaps you do too. But we'll take a short break on the air and be right back.
In commercial break.
All right. Henry, I'm going to ask you to quickly repeat that again, because my producer happened to be telling me something when you were talking about what happens if you booked and then later you see the airfare did come down.
Right.
What do you do then?
So many of the U.S. airlines now will give you a full travel credit. They don't charge those expensive $200 change fees anymore. So if you book a non-refundable fare, as long as it's not basic economy on most airlines, you decide either you can't travel, don't want to travel, or you see a lower airfare, you can cancel that reservation and the airline will give you a full credit of all the fare, taxes, and fees that you've paid.
And then you rebook with the credit.
And okay. You can rebook, but you have up to a year to use your travel credit. So if it's an airline you fly regularly, you can apply that towards your next trip.
Okay, we have about 45 seconds. I want to ask you if travel insurance, I always decline them, but do you think, given what's happening now, it's more worth doing or considering?
I would say this about travel insurance, especially with COVID and depending on where you're going, and especially if you're traveling outside the US, it may be worth it to at least examine the policies to see what is included and what is not included. Something to remember, during COVID, a lot of the travel insurance companies said that they would stop covering COVID-related illnesses. So it's really important to understand what is and what is not included and what are the conditions that you would get a refund.
I see. And policies differ, right? So you do have to read the fine print.
Absolutely. Now, this is also important. If you're thinking of taking a cruise, insurance is very, very important because the cruise lines are not being as flexible as they were during COVID with refunds.
All right. Henry, we'll take every single last second. All great information. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
6, 5 seconds, 4,
And that's going to do it for now. Thank you so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers. Today, we broke down all the COVID-19 headlines, including San Francisco having the highest case rate out of all the counties in the state, plus everything regarding air travel delays and cancellations. We'll be here every weekday at 3 on air and on live stream. Bye-bye.